Now let's get to the facial muscles. Mugging with muscles. When we look at muscles, muscles contract. That's basically what they do. They shorten. Most muscles are attached to bones, so they move limbs around. The facial muscles, some of them are attached to bones because we got to open and close a jaw to chew, but most of them are attached to the skin. And so what are we doing with facial muscles is we move the skin around in the face. And so we use that for multiple reasons. We use that to illustrate your speech. For example, we raise our eyebrows when we're inquisitive, or we lower them when the voice deepens. We're also ingesting nutrients, and we can chew. We also use facial muscles to express when you think, like we furrow the brows or we purse the lips. We can also use the facial muscles to express ourselves emotionally, symbolically. And so we have multiple uses for these facial muscles. Facial muscles in emotional signaling is very important and very interesting. Darwin, back when Darwin was doing things, he said facial expressions are the residual actions of more complete behavioral responses and occur in combination with other bodily responses. Well, that's pretty interesting. Sylvan Tompkins, some other guy in the 60s, suggested that emotion is the basis of human motivation and that it is the seat of emotion and that seat is in the face. That's interesting. So the face is really a place where we read each other. And then Ekman, a UCSF guy, local guy, went to New Guinea and he proved universality of these facial expressions by having tribal people who never seen outsiders accurately match the emotions. Also very interesting. And then I found something down in here. I found something in a Newsweek magazine that talks about when we paralyze the frown muscle with Botox, we short circuit an anger emotion itself. And that's even more interesting because what that told me basically is that we're not just expressing our emotions outward when we make faces, but we're also having the emotion go back in. So there is a piece of where we can say, well, let's fake it till we make it. Let's be sort of happy until we are really happy. But, of course, that doesn't work either. And we can't just, paralyze a muscle and think that will take away the anger emotion. Of course, that doesn't work either. That will just build up on the inside and then explode some other way. So we have 7 universal facial expressions. They're happy, surprise, contempt, sad, disgust, fear, and anger. Let's talk about them and go through them in order. The first one is disgust. This is an emotion, it's very powerful. It shows when you smell something that is rotten or when you see something or someone whose behavior you absolutely abhor. Or when you see something disgusting. So the nose wrinkles, like, take that nose away from that mouth, and the upper part of the lip raises up and exposes the canine teeth. And so you think, when you see that, mouth opens, you think of a dog snarling. So that's disgust. That's one of these emotions. Kind of like your whole body, barfs and moves away. But the face is where it shows. And then, of course, we got the anger emotion. And anger is an expression that comes in several combinations that involves an inner eyebrow muscle furrowing the brow. And often the nostrils are raised and the eyes widen. They get more open and sometimes the teeth are flashing. That's anger. You see, these two guys, they look pretty similar, huh? When happy is interesting, we have 2 smiles. We have a loose smile that's a polite smile. Smile because when we just need a smile for to conform social norms or rules, we're actually just raising the corners of the mouth up. But when we're actually having joy when we smile, the eyes smile also, and we contract around the eye sockets. So that's smile. So we have two smiles, a polite smile and a true smile. And you see this polite smile here, and then the true smile on the lady over here. And then surprise and fear. Surprise and fear are two of the most difficult emotions to distinguish between. They're both expressions open the eyes by raising the eyebrow and the eyelids. And then a surprise is often a jaw-dropping event, like Lucy over here. Jaw-dropping. And a fear stretches the mouth and makes it wide. So it stretches it horizontally. So that's a distinguishing factor between those two. And then sad is the emotion is expressed by when we raise the inner eyebrow but not the outer eyebrow, so they go down. The corner of the mouth also are pulled downwards towards the chin. So that's our sad emotion. And then lastly, and believe me, I did this years ago. Lastly, we have the emotion of contempt. So these pictures are not just new. This is the act of despising. The intent behind this expression is one of superiority. It may be seen when someone is arguing and thinking they have the upper hand or a moral high ground. The corners of either the left or the right lip are pulled up and towards the ears. This is basically a half smile or a smirk. And it's actually the only naturally occurring expression that is asymmetric and not on both sides. Some people argue that contempt is a most significant indicator of negative energy. Oh boy. And look at who we got there. And so those are the universal emotions. This is actually a picture spread from this show guy, Lied to Me. It was only one season. It's on Netflix. It's pretty fun to watch. It's based on this UCSF guy that went to New Guinea. So anger, disgust, happiness, contempt, surprise, fear, and sadness. All right, so that's the emotions that we can make. So and so now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the muscles, and then we're going to see, who does what. And so the muscles do different movements of these faces. But let's talk about muscles in general. We have a few terms that we need to talk about when we talk about muscle. We have a term called the origin. We have a term called the insertion. Those two we use to describe the attachments of the muscle, mostly to bones, in the whole muscle department that we're going to talk about. But in the face, some of those are skin parts or other muscles that they pull on. And so the origin describes a stable region of a muscle as a foundation, and the insertion describes the end of the muscle, the other end of the muscle, that is going to move towards the origin, and is going to move that skin towards it, or move that bone towards it. Like what you have down here in the picture is the biceps brachii, and so what that does, it bends the elbow. So the origin here is the shoulder part, and then it reaches down into the upper part of the forearm, and when this one contracts, it bends the elbow. It pulls that lower arm upward towards the shoulder. And so in this situation, the shoulder is the origin, and the forearm is the insertion. That's the movable region. And then we describe an action of a muscle. And the action results in muscle contraction. And again, that's what muscles do. They contract, they shorten. And then each muscle has to be fed by a nerve, which is stimulating that muscle, and that's a motor nerve. We're going to talk about that, and that's described as the innervation. We don't focus too heavily on who muscle is innervating whom and all that, because that gets very complicated, and I think we have enough to talk about already. But almost all facial muscles are innervated by the cranial nerve number 7, which is the facial nerve. So that's something that is, a piece of information that might be helpful. So when we look at the skull muscles, or the muscles in the face and skull area, we have two sets of muscles. We have ones that do facial expressions. They're mostly attached from bone to skin. And then we got the ones that are concerning themselves with chewing. And those are basically moving the mandible. So they're attached to the skull and then the mandible. So there's a good little overview picture of these muscles. So we're going to go through all of those right now. The frontalis muscle, when we look at what it does, it's an inner brow riser and an outer brow riser. So the frontalis muscle is attached here on the top layer of the skull. That's called the epicranial aponeurosis. That's a flat tendon that's attached. You know, you can actually move it. You can take your hand and put it on your head and sort of move that thing around, up, back, and down. So that what you actually move underneath the hair is that epicranial aponeurosis. It's also known, has a different name as well, as galla aponeurotica. So these AKAs are also known as. So I put those in there in case you read the book and it has that different name and you go like, what the heck are they talking about? So that way you have, you know, more names to choose from. So that originates up here in the front of the head, and then it inserts right in here, the skin of the eyebrows and the root of the nose. And so yeah, when it contracts, it raises these pieces upward. So it raises the eyebrow and it wrinkles the forehead. The picture down here indicates trigger points. So that's kind of interesting. The points here, the X's, is where you can press those muscles if people have pain in the areas that are red. And so you have an X back here that you can sort of work on, which is actually the back of the muscle that's more back here. It's not the frontalis, it's the occipitalis. We don't have to worry about that. But if you have pain here, it could be that this muscle is having a weird spot in the muscle that if you squeeze it and you work it out, it sort of relieves the tension in these red spots. So I put some of these pictures up because you can actually, you know, work with them if you're interested. What you do is you squeeze those places in the X in the muscle that are sort of tight factors in the muscle that you can sort of feel, nodules, and you squeeze the blood out of those, and then guess what? They have to relax, and when they relax, they don't cause these pain patterns. So that's probably good to know. Then we have a muscle called the corrugator supercilii muscle. So one of the things about these facial muscles is you got these goofy names. And so you just got to sort of go with it, and part of your job is to, you know, have retrieval exercises that match some of these names up, and you can point to them. And when it goes to the test, I'm not using that many names. Some of them are caught out, so don't worry, I'm not going to make you spell the most craziest names. But anyway, so corrugator supercilii is the brow lowerer. So that muscle is right here in the bottom of the frontalis, sort of. And so it actually goes underneath. It goes in the frontal bone, and then it goes into the skins of the eyebrow, and so it draws the eyebrows down and inward medially, making vertical wrinkles of the forehead. So this is a frowning muscle. See right here, frowning muscle. Or right there, that's a good muscle. It's actually the one that contracts to prevent high sun glare. But we can inject that with Botox. With botulinum toxin. Yeah, that's a toxin. That's why I'm saying it that way. And that can help migraines, and we can do that for aesthetic reasons also, but you know, I don't necessarily personally recommend that. Orbicularis oculi muscle is the next one. Orbicularis means round. Oculi means eye. So that's the muscle around the eye. So when we look at descriptive things of this muscle, we can call it the lid tightener, or we can call it the cheek raiser. So the palpebral part is the eyelid part, and the orbital part is the bony part. But this muscle is attached to the frontal and the maxillary bone right here, and then it tissues on the eyelids right around, and then it goes into the eyelids. So it closes the eyelid. It makes folds radiating from the lateral angle, so it makes the crow's feet. And when we contract it very strongly, we can help raise the cheek a little bit. Orbicularis oculi muscle. Then look at this, next name.